みんな何かに酔っ払ってねえとやってられなかったんだな。みんな何かの奴隷だった。
I'll be honest with you, I think never before have I been more emotional than when I watched the ending to Attack on Titan. Ever since I watched it, I've been thinking and philosophizing non-stop about each and every possible connection, every scene, every meaning, everything. And I've come to the conclusion that a lot of people keep misunderstanding one specific scene in the ending. Or I guess several scenes, technically. Okay, if I want to be for real, there are a lot of scenes ending haters keep misunderstanding, but these specific scenes, even the ending defenders misunderstand sometimes. So today, we'll be talking about love. Or rather, its lack of significance. Spoiler warning, I'm literally gonna be talking about the last episode of Attack on Titan, so there is definitely gonna be at least one spoiler. Like, the scenes I've been referring to are all the scenes where they mention love. From the scene where Eren tells Armin that Ymir was in love with King Fritz, all the way to the entire Eren-Mikasa love plot. Many fans are under the assumption that Isayama pushed love to be one of the core elements of Attack on Titan, even though every romance plot so far just lacked proper depth, except for Ymir's and OG Ymir's and Historia's, I guess. And to a certain extent, I would agree with this statement, but I only would, cause romance literally doesn't matter. Let's talk about how love as a quote-unquote core concept was introduced to Attack on Titan. Armin and Eren are in paths where Eren is explaining everything Armin needs to know from his viewpoint. Eren starts to talk about Ymir's suffering for all these 2000 years waiting for someone to release her, and that someone is actually Mikasa. This left a lot of people in confusion because it had already been established that Eren is the person who has freed her, which is where the entire controversy already begins. But that's not all. He says that he actually has no idea why it's Mikasa, but he knows for certain what the outcome that Mikasa brings upon is. The outcome Ymir allowed Eren to peek inside. This is just one of the many things that made him keep moving forward. He then briefly mentions how he believes that Ymir was actually in love with her torturer and enslaver King Fritz, but we'll get to that later. Another thing he says is that he did all that he did without even knowing if his friends would survive, which directly contradicts another statement he makes, where he says that he went back and forth in time to try every possible outcome and none of them were good enough. This is where I have to introduce you to the concept of an unreliable narrator. Attack on Titan is being told by the perspectives of many, mostly by Eren, Armin, Mikasa, Levi, Historia, Reiner, and Falco. These are all characters playing a role in the story, so understandably they're not all knowing. Yet when it comes to Eren, his head is, as he said it himself, a total mess. A lot of the scenes we see from his perspective are always directly reflecting his own thoughts and feelings of the current situation, one of them being Ymir's backstory. It was presented to us in a way where we think that all Ymir lacked was freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to roam, the freedom to keep her body, even the freedom to live. This is further enhanced by the fact that she's a slave, the direct opposite to freedom. And of course this is what Eren sees. The backstory perfectly reflects on Eren and his story, making them seem like a mirrored image of one another, but that was actually never the case. In fact, Eren and Ymir play the whole opposite character in their stories. Even though they both felt like birds in a cage, one of them was actually a growling dog, and that's because he had something Ymir never had before. Love. Think about it, Eren terrorizes poor civilians, even betraying his own friends just to achieve what he wants. I mean, he literally wipes out 80% of humanity, like, brother! Yet, he is still loved by his friends. No matter how much wrong he does, his friends keep trying to find a way to save both him and the world all the time. It's just like an abusive relationship. Wait a second, doesn't that sound familiar? King Fritz made out with other women, and the only reason he kept Ymir alive was just cause she had Titan powers. Even though he had 3 daughters with her, he didn't even give a damn about her in the slightest. Now doesn't that sound awfully familiar to another relationship in this series? I think by now you must understand what I'm trying to say here. Ymir was never supposed to be the mirrored image of Eren everyone thought she was. Even though both of them seek freedom, it was only Eren who wanted to trample over the entire planet. Ymir is supposed to represent the Alliance, or more so, Mikasa. Cause both they all ever wanted was to be loved back, but it was and will always be an unsolvable issue. A conflict that will never end until you simply let go. This was never a story about love to begin with. Attack on Titan has always been about endless cycles that will never end. Whether it's war, love, doubt, freedom, revenge, everyone is a slave to something. All we can do is simply let go and just live life. Or in other words, to choose which master we'll be the slave of. So, while editing this video, I came up with another theory in which Eren is an unreliable narrator by misunderstanding Ymir's feelings for King Fritz as love. Maybe he saw Mikasa not just as a slave to her feelings for Eren, but as a slave to mindless devotion, doing anything to save Eren. Maybe by being a little freaked up in his head, by being in the past, present and future all at the same time, he couldn't differentiate mindless devotion and love from one another, and thought that Ymir has to be freed from her love towards King Fritz, which would completely contradict anything I've said in this video so far, but hey, it's just another theory, so who knows. Also, I just found out that the quote I mentioned in the beginning of my video, you know, the one Kenny said, actually originated from Vinland Saga, which is pretty cool to see, considering that my most popular and the only other anime related video on my channel is also about Vinland Saga. Thought I might just mention that. Needless to say, remember to love while you still can, and have a wonderful day.